Hey guys, what's up? I had another video I was going to upload first that I filmed last night, but it seems this is the topic everybody's talking about in the VC, so I thought I had better put my 2 cents in, or whatever it's worth. The topic is when is enough enough? And that's a question every collector has to ask themselves at some point in the process, or the journey, or whatever. When is it time to get off the horse and enjoy what you have? Which I can only speak for myself, of course. I can't speak for anybody else. Robert, if you're watching this, hey, I don't think we've ever actually met. I'm Doug, obviously. Seen you around the Facebook page. But anyways, you asked the question, when is enough enough? And it's a tough question. I mean, as far as quantity, which is, I guess, the elephant in the room, of course, there's no question. It's too much. We don't need all this music. When you start filling up Expedit shelves or whatever it is you use, and cubes and crates and what have you, you've got too much. But we keep doing it because we're collectors. We love music. This is what we do. At some point, you have to find a balance, and some people have touched on, if you're getting your bills paid, everything else is in order. This is what you enjoy doing. Why not? Which I agree to that a certain extent. It can be a fine line between collecting and it becoming like an obsessive, compulsive hoarding kind of thing. If you get my drift, I think a periodic purge of the collection is helpful. Our tastes change as we progress. Something that you enjoyed once, you may not listen to again. Which that was one thing I think the original video touched on, things not being listened to. Which I certainly ran into that problem when I first started getting seriously into vinyl. I mean, you go to the store and you're picking up 5, 10 albums at a time, whatever it is. You bring them home. Of course, you don't have time to listen to them all at once. So they kind of sit there. And you go out again, you get more, the pile gets bigger, and so I finally had to knuckle down, listen to everything, and go through what I wanted to keep, what I didn't want to keep, and now my kind of process is things come in, it gets added to my database, if it's something that could possibly be a keeper for me. Sometimes I buy things just for possibility of trade or sale down the road if I come across it. And then it doesn't go anywhere until it's been listened to and decided on if it's staying or leaving. That's just kind of my process. So that prevents the new arrivals from sitting there for 10 years and not being listened to. You were talking about Japanese pressings and white label promos and this kind of thing, which is, I think, is somewhat of a separate issue. For me personally, I'm not an audiophile. That doesn't interest me at all. I'm perfectly happy going to the thrift store and finding something for $1 or $2 or whatever it is that's in reasonably good playing shape. In fact, if put to the test, I probably prefer it that way. I like when somebody's written their name on the sleeve and it's got a scratch or two here and there. That means to me that the record has had a history, it's passed through various hands. I sort of like to wonder about who owned it before, under what circumstances they decided to buy it, and how many hands it's passed through since then, and how many it will pass through after it leaves mine. Because I think either you or somebody else was saying we don't really own anything. We are borrowing it or curating it for a time, and then it has got to go on. Which curating kind of brings me to another point. I've tended to think of my collection more as a library than as a collection per se. And it's just a library of music, like you'd have a library of books. I sort of had it in mind. My kids are little right now. But, when they are old enough to start getting interested in music, they'll come to me and ask about the Beatles, and I can point them, over there on my shelves. There's the Beatles right there. Start with this one, or Led Zeppelin, what have you, and those things are there. And yeah, I really enjoy digging and going to thrift stores and record stores. I'm getting a bit more selective now that I've been collecting for a few years. Sort of asking myself the question, does this add something to what I already have? Does it add to the story that my collection is telling? I've always kind of thought of it that way. I like to have like major artists, classic albums represented. That's all those touchstones. I don't care about multiple pressings too much. I could probably count on one hand the number of things I have different versions of. CD is kind of a different story. Like I won't usually buy something new on CD that I already have on vinyl, but if I see something in a thrift store, sure, why not? I like listening to CDs on the road. They're handy for that, or digitizing into iTunes or whatever. But yeah, as far as when is enough, that's a personal decision everybody has to make. Certainly, I'm trying to get a little more focused, a little more discriminatory, I guess you'd say, as to what I pick up, first of all, what I decide to keep. A lot of times, I'll listen to something and enjoy it at the time, file it away on the shelves, and then, 3 days or 3 months later, I'll think of it again, and I can't remember a single song off that album. So what is the point of keeping it? And that's just kind of the thing you have to go to every, maybe give it a bit of time and go back and pull these things out and say, I don't really need this here. This isn't adding anything to the story that my collection or my library is trying to tell. And yeah, just as kind of a side note, there is I was talking a bit in some of my other videos about a large collection I was buying a few records out of, that older collectors is downsizing and putting his collection up for sale. And in this collection, I guess he had been hitting record stores on the regular back in 70s, 80s, whatever, and hitting the clearance bins, cutout bins. And he had crates of sealed records that he'd had around for decades that had never been played, never listened to, and was now selling them, which in some cases, in fact in most cases, I'm sure he made a profit on them. But the point is, I'd rather make sure that I've actually listened to all my records and figured out whether I like them enough to keep them, and go from there and purge and cull as necessary as our tastes go along. I once had sort of when I first started collecting vinyl, I had sort of a crazy idea of collecting every 80s song that I ever liked. I wanted to have that on vinyl. So I was picking up all this stuff like crazy. And then, of course, as you go along, your tastes, kind of the focus of your collecting changes, and yeah, I had to get rid of a bunch of those records, basically. Because there was no point keeping them around. So that's kind of the main philosophy of my collection as far as the main body of like rock and roll and stuff like that. I do have some other genres I'm interested in. Like the rock music I'm not paying too much for. Probably a good 75%, if not more, of my collection is like thrift finds, kind of cheap bin finds at record stores. I do have the reggae genre is one that's very special to me, and I will pay extra for originals or old pressings of that, or some of the new reissues that come out. I'm not buying a lot of new music on like rock and roll and stuff like that on vinyl. But yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts on the subject. It's kind of a personal decision everybody has to make. I know we're collectors. We love this stuff. It'd make me really sad if the day came that I wasn't buying any new records at all. There's that thrill of the hunt, I guess people often say it is, but I just like going to a place like thrift store, and you never know what you're going to find. It could be some album you've never heard of before, some artist you've never heard of, just something new to learn about. That's my main thing. And yeah, so you have to strike a balance between what's coming in, what's staying, and what's going out. And yeah, so that's my thoughts on the subject. I hope it made some sense. Hope I don't ramble too much. But no easy, clear-cut answers, I don't think. It's a personal decision everybody has to make. Of according to their needs in life, their storage space, and their financial situation. I'm at the point where sort of keeping most of my stuff around in case my kids sort of have some interest in vinyl at a later age. They're a little bit too young now. They are listening. I can tell that. How much they're absorbing, I don't know. It's too early to tell. But we'll see how it goes as time progresses. Alright, that's my entry. Hope it kind of made some fashion of sense. Cheers, guys.